Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday. I'm actually take my shoes off here. Hopefully this is okay. Just setting this up. Happy Monday, and I'm Kristen Zuzak-Volk, and I just returned from an amazing retreat weekend with hand-in-hand parenting, and really fulfilling and supportive. And it's interesting that I had this question in my head. I have to do a Facebook Live on this, like before I even went there, and it kind of like rolled around in my head the whole time I was there. And the question is, do we have to be good to be loved? Like, do we, as parents, as adults, as children, like in general, and as human beings, do we have to be good to be loved? It's a huge, huge question. And I get emotional asking that question. I get emotional asking it to myself too. And, think back to your own childhood. Were you required to be good in order to be loved? Was there an unspoken code in your family? The more goodness you showed, the more love you got. Is that how it worked? Or if you were less good, if you were showing more off-track behaviors, if you were being defiant, you couldn't sit at the table quietly, if you didn't eat all the food on your plate, if you were showing, if you didn't play well with others. So if you were showing less goodness, did that make you less lovable? That's a huge, huge question. And I think in general, our society actually operates that way. Whew. That's hard. I think that's really hard to think about how culturally we reward, we praise all that goodness in our children, which is understandable. I'm not going to say it's bad or good to do that. I'm just saying, like, this is just kind of how we function. And then we punish all the things that aren't good. And so what happens is we tend to entangle and enmesh these ideas of goodness equals lovability, right? Like, if we show goodness and we are good, then we're lovable, and our lovability increases. That, I think, in general, is a lot of times how society works. Not always, of course, but so I think that this really leads to the next question is like, what if we untangled that? What if we, and please say hello if you're here. I would love to know if you're here, and I'd love to know if you can hear me. That's always helpful to know. What if we untangled goodness and love so that it doesn't require goodness to be lovable? What if they were completely separated from each other? And that's a big, huge question, is to see if we can even do that. And actually, the way that I do that, the way that in my studies and my practice as a parent, my practice as a parent educator and a social worker, is to say, so what if we thought about it this way? We're all born good. Every human being on the planet comes into the world as a newborn infant with pure goodness. Like, that's a key core concept to think about that. So that it's we all have access to that. It's all shining through us, that kind of goodness, right? So then we have to think about, so then what are those quote unquote bad behaviors, right? Like, what is that defiance and that, like, throwing the shoe across the room or being aggressive to a person? Like, what are those things then? Because we tend to look at them as bad behaviors, right? So if every child who's born into this world is born good, and yet at some point in time, because I think almost every child on the planet starts to display some sort of off-track behaviors, temper tantrums, whatever it might be, some certainly worse than others. What if we looked at it as not that that child didn't have goodness, not that they weren't pure goodness, but they can't access that right now? That the lack of connection, and there's all kinds of reasons why a child goes off track or shows those kinds of behaviors. So what if we looked at it as that off track behavior was just broken connection, or maybe it's overwhelm, or maybe it's, too much of anything, but it had nothing to do with that child's innate goodness that they're displaying. And what if you had that as a parent? What if you were, when you had your worst days, if you had that as a child, if you on your worst days, when you showed attitude, when you showed not wanting to go out to eat, and you were stuck in that feeling of not wanting to go out to eat with the rest of the family, or you couldn't sit still at the restaurant table, or whatever behaviors that might have cropped up for you, or you were too loud or too rambunctious or too much in some way or another, what if you were given that gift of the adults around you knowing that you were just completely good, no matter what behavior you showed, and that you were completely lovable, no matter what behavior you showed? It doesn't mean that we don't need to deal with off-track behaviors. That's like a separate thing that I won't get into in this video. But what if it meant, dealing with those behaviors meant more connection? What if it meant more special time, doing whatever the child wants to do for a set period of time with a timer, delighting in that child, filling up that child's connection cup? What if it meant listening to the hurt the child has? What if it meant more play so the child can release tension? What if it meant more warm limits directed at the child so that that child can feel connection and love and support through those hard things that the child is feeling in his or her life? Those hard things that are running the child's brain, so to speak. Well, that's what neuroscience shows us, right? And that has nothing to do with goodness, does it? That's a completely separate thing. And for me, being really clear on and not that I can do this all the time. I'm not saying it's easy. I know it's really simple, but I also know it's not easy. And this is my journey. This is, I think, all of our journeys as a parent. Is how do we remember our children's goodness in those hard, messy, loud, crazy moments? How do we do that? And that's another video, right? But I'm just really trying to address that question of, do we have to be good in order to be loved? And that's really not, even though society in general kind of works that way, I really invite us to think a little bit differently, because we already are good. We already are deserving of love because we were born, because we exist. We do deserve that. And so rather than saying, do we need to be good in order to be loved, I would rather say that we are good and we deserve love, and we need love in order to show our goodness. We need lots and lots of love in hard moments, in hard things that happen in our lives, in the hard things that we carry with us in our journey throughout life, in order to show that goodness. And so it's almost opposite to think about it that way. And so I really invite you to look at your own journey and look at this question for yourself and your own life, as well as in your life for your child. And that invite you to work on anything that gets in your way of remembering that your child is good. Because I guarantee you, we'll have moments when we can't remember our child is good. And so I invite you to work on those things. And there are ways to do that. Listening partnership, to me, is one of the best ways to work on the things that get in our way of remembering that our child is good, because that is like the foundation piece of responding in a way that helps the child to remember themselves that they're good. Because once they, are constantly, if a child is constantly reminded that they're not good, or that when we use this evaluation system of, more goodness, more lovability, and more love, that gets hard. That gets really hard for the child. And then that's affecting their self-esteem and their sense of self and all of that. So, again, not an easy task, but I really invite you. It's actually a beautiful journey if you can keep working on remembering your child's goodness, to continue on that journey. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to connecting with you more. Bye.